Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head up to Norway once again, and we're going to revisit a brewery that you've seen me review many things from before. So we're going to go to Oslo, the capital city in the south, and we're going to have a look at yet another beer from Amundsen Bryggeri. So this one is called Beyond the Spectrum. It comes in at 7.2% ABV, and this one is a New England IPA. So I didn't realise until I was updating the brewery notes for this video that it's been about 6 months since I last reviewed an IPA from Amundsen. The last beer that I had from these guys was the Viking Brunch Fest, which was a lovely pastry stout. That's one of the best stouts I think I've reviewed on the channel actually, and probably my favourite beer that I've had from Amundsen so far actually. But the last IPA that I had from these guys was apparently back in March, and that was the Fade to Green, which was a collaboration they did with Finback from New York over in America. I honestly did not realise it had been so long since I had a look at an Amundsen IPA, because probably these guys are best known for the IPAs and for the big pastry stouts these days. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out, because it has been a good while since I've had one of these beers from Amundsen. But probably one of the better known Norwegian breweries these days, along with the likes of Lervig, Cervicium. These guys have got some really nice beers, and I would highly recommend that you try some of the Norwegian beers if you get the chance. Generally speaking, the standard of craft beer in Scandinavia is great, and the Norwegians have got some very good breweries actually. I do wish that I could try some more of the very small breweries that are up there. I need to get a Norwegian beer mule for that though, and there hasn't been any offers for that yet, unfortunately. So fingers crossed. If some of you are watching from Norway, let me know. Quite happy to send you some money if you can organise a Norwegian beer package for me. That would be awesome to get more Norwegian beers on the channel. But yeah, and we get quite a lot of Amundsen. We do get a good bit of Lervig, and we get the odd Cervicium and things like that as well, and a few other kind of random bits and bobs too. But I'd love to get a hold of some more Norwegian beers. But yeah, one of the other things that caught my eye with this beer was the artwork. That was the main reason I got this one actually, the artwork and the name. So I'm not sure exactly how much I've told you about my scientific career, but when I was involved more heavily with chemistry and physics, I was by trade a molecular astrophysicist, astrochemist, and I was a spectroscopist. So basically what I was doing was working within those two fields in spectroscopy, using light to kind of quantify and identify different molecules and atoms and things like that. You know, light is an extremely powerful tool, and I was essentially kind of reverse engineering the camera, looking at, IR and UV spectra of molecules and things from stars. It's really interesting, you can do lots of different stuff with that. But I love references to the electromagnetic spectrum, and that's kind of what I thought this one is. It could well be a kind of reference to, Beyond the Spectrum, the whole, the LGBT thing. It could be something like that. It could be a sort of abstract reference, but going by the artwork, I think it might be a mixture of both. Who knows? But yeah, I think the artwork on this one is pretty cool. So this is a can that I'm definitely going to keep a hold of. I bought this beer from Kiosk in Copenhagen, which is a bottle shop that I really love to go to. I recommend that you guys check that one out as well if you find yourselves in Copenhagen. And a big shout out to my friend Ahmed as well, who brought this back over the border for me when he was over in Copenhagen recently. He picked up a few beers for me when he was over there, so took the opportunity and he was able to help me out, which is great. So let's get on with the video then. We've been blabbing away a little bit with this, but yeah, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Amundsen Bryggeri before, and you will no doubt see more from these guys in the fairly near future, because we do get their beers quite regularly. There's all the usual social media down there as well. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Norwegian beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to fairly regularly, but not as regularly as I would like. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Amundsen Bryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So Amundsen Bryggeri, as I've told you already, are based in Oslo, the capital city in Norway. in the southern part of the country. But the brewery is part of the Akerhus Group, which owns a number of bars and restaurants around Oslo, and the main men in this company are Ole Johan Tollefsen, Bore Jensen and Tom Erik Andreasen. So the first brewery was part of a gastropub in Stortingsgatan, and this was just a very small operation. You'll find it pretty much right in front of the old townhouse in the middle of Oslo. But the key man in getting this kind of brew pub up and running was Tom Alfred Oimo, who had been a home brewer for a good number of years, and he still works mainly at that, it's called the Amundsen Bryggeri actually, in the middle of Oslo, and I do recommend you go and check it out. Hopefully the next time I get to Oslo I can film an out and about video there, because I really enjoyed my little visit to that bar actually. But they expanded the brewery, and by 2015 they were producing around 200,000 litres of beer per year. They'd become quite established throughout Norway, having set up a larger brewery in the Nydalen area of Oslo, and that was when they really started to focus more on having a production brewery as well as the little brew pub. But in 2016 the parent company purchased the property company Hauketo Eindom, so basically Hauketo Property if you want to translate that into English, and with this they acquired the Bjornar Veien Fjorton property, the Bjornar's Way, if you like, Bjornar's Way 14 property in the Hauketo area in the southern part of Oslo, and this was turned into a 3,500 square metre brewery, and they began brewing there in late 2016, and the new brewery capacity started off at 1 million litres of beer per year. The brewery equipment they have there came from Braukon in Germany, and the canning and bottling lines were brought in from Italy. The total investment in this site was apparently 16 million Norwegian kroners, which translates roughly to about 1.5 million euros, maybe 1.6 million euros if I'm remembering correctly. The Norwegian kroner I think is a little bit stronger, but the managing director of the brewery is Jeffrey Jansen van Vuren, and then Matthew Thomas and John Hudson are the others that are involved in the daily running of the brewery. But the artwork on the cans is designed by the American Peter John de Villiers, and in 2019 these guys produced a total of 9,500 hectolitres of beer per year, and I think that is, yeah, that's 950,000 litres actually, so that's just shy of the 1 million litre capacity that they have. But as of September 2020, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 95 different beers according to Untappd. So yeah, probably the best known IPA and the most regular one that you'll find from these guys would be the Apocalyptic Thunder Juice, but I'm guessing for those of you who are watching either from outside of Europe or from other places in the continent, you're probably most likely to find the stouts from these guys, the Dessert in a Can, and the barrel-aged Dessert in a Cans have been out there now, and a few of the other kind of tall boy ones as well. It's probably most likely the big kind of sweet stouts that you're finding from these guys, and they are really interesting. Like I say, the Viking Brunchfest Club that I had from Amundsen was absolutely lovely. One of my favourite stouts I think that I've reviewed on the channel so far, and that was a monster. I think that was about 13 or 14% if I remember rightly. But yeah, these guys probably best known for the kind of hazy New England IPAs. The Apocalyptic Thunder Juice is probably their best known IPA. And that's quite a nice one as well. I've reviewed that on the channel for you a good few years ago now. But yeah, they're quite a prolific brewery. Space Tyro was another very good IPA that I had from these guys. So yeah, this is one that I highly recommend you check out, and probably one of the better known Norwegian breweries along with the likes of Lervik these days. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Amundsen Bryggeri for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. Let's get on and have a taste of this beer. So as you can see, the artwork in this is lovely. I love this, you know, basically the hop flower has been turned into a prism and it's separating all the different lights, all the different light wavelengths and stuff. I think that's pretty damn awesome. But yeah, I don't know if, you know, Beyond the Spectrum, I'm not sure I think this one is, just going by the artwork, I'm guessing it is more of a scientific reference than something to the, you know, the LGBT plus star, whatever whatever it actually is these days, you know, whatever the actual term for it is. I think it is more of a scientific reference, this, rather than that. But the artwork on this one is absolutely beautiful, and I will be keeping a hold of this can actually. I really like the Amundsen artwork. But yeah, 7.2% New England IPA, this one. Yeah, it looks very, very good actually. So yeah, without further ado, let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting then. As I said to you, if you find yourself in Oslo, I do recommend that you go and check out the Amundsen Bryggeri I believe it's called, to give it its full name, in front of the old townhouse next to the water in Oslo. Oslo's a very nice city actually. It is expensive if you're not living in Scandinavia or Switzerland or the Netherlands. To be honest, you know, Norway is pretty expensive because they get very, very high wages there. So, yep. I would actually like to go up to Norway and work for a little while. It would be quite interesting, but obviously Sweden, South Sweden is home these days. And we've got Copenhagen just across the water. But, yeah. It would be nice to go and spend a little bit of time up there and try a few more of the other Norwegian breweries. There's some really good smaller breweries that I've had. You know, the best known ones probably are Bryggeriet, Servicium are quite well known, and then you've got Lervig and Amundsen are probably the biggest. You know, Lervig, Amundsen and Hand are probably the biggest exporters. Back in the day you had Nygna as well, but you've got other breweries like Lindeholms. You've also got Eketid, Austmann, Huefjell, you've got all of these kind of guys as well. There's lots of breweries up in Norway. I just wish I could review a few of the more smaller ones for you actually. But yeah, as you can see and as you would expect from a New England IPA, this one has poured. This one's actually one of the more orangey leaning New England IPAs I've come across over the last little while. So I'm wondering if there's a bit of like caramel or carapils or something like that in this, just going from the colour of this beer. I think there will be a bit more of a brown sugary presence to this one. But as you can see, it poured with about somewhere between a quarter and a third finger of a frothy, I would say quite cream coloured head actually. But it does look pretty damn nice, this one. Definitely one of the more orangey leaning New England IPAs that I've had. It looks almost kind of like peach juice or something like that, to be honest with you. It does look a little bit like a kind of peach juice, this one. I always like to compare the New England IPAs to different fruit juices. Because that's just what they remind me of. But if I stick my fingers behind the glass, there you can see the level of transparency with this one. But one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, which has incidentally just faded away to be a very, very thin, foamy layer. But this isn't the soupiest and gloopiest of New England IPAs I've come across. I think at 7.2%, I think this is one of the slightly stronger ones that I remember. The slightly stronger single IPAs I remember coming across from Amundsen. I've had doubles, you know, the Space Tiger I'm sure was an 8% double from what I remember. I do wish they'd bring that beer back actually, that was a lovely one, the Space Tiger, it was amazing. But yeah, lovely looking beer this one, nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. But let's have a look at that aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. Ooh, that smells pretty damn nice, I'll have to say. It's this one does have a bit of a boozier, maltier presence to it actually. I'll say that straight away. So this one, when it comes down to it, there is a good bit of wheatiness to the malt base with this beer. You can smell that slightly stronger bitey wheaty note. Now, have in fairness, I've always found the Amundsen beers to be that little bit more bitey, if you like. They usually have a bit more of a kind of green, you know, a big floral bitiness to them, and they've also got a bit of a wheaty bitiness as well, actually. So yeah, I've always found that with these, with the Amundsen beers. The Lervig ones I think tend to be a bit more kind of creamy almost, whereas the Amundsen ones are a little bit more bitey, I think. But yeah, the malt base in this one is quite nice. I mean, you smell a good bit of that big kind of white bready wheaty note out of it. There is a good bit of pungency and bitiness to the wheat. You can smell a bit of the smoother oats further forward on the nose, but I do get quite a little bit of a kind of caramelly, brown sugary note out of this. There is a wee bit of that kind of biscuity, oily type thing, like a McVitie's digestive quality, and it does come across as slightly boozy in the nose actually. You do get quite a wee bit of a boozy, biscuity, brown sugary note out of this one. But at 7.2%, you know, in fairness, you are going to get some of that, and it might well be. This, you know, going by the colour of this, they could be trying to introduce a few sort of West Coasty, kind of West Coasty notes to this one. So yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think the Apocalyptic Thunder Juice was a bit more like this. It had a bit more of a kind of brown sugary note to it, in fairness. And I have noticed that there has been more of a brown sugary kind of presence creeping into a lot of New England IPAs these days. Whereas if you go back to the ones like the OO Brewing Narangi and things like that. Those are distinctly more kind of bready and smooth, if you like, whereas the New England IPA has definitely got sweeter over the last kind of couple of years, actually, particularly the last 18 months or something, I would say. But yeah, the malty base in this one it's got a good bit of a caramelly note to it, quite a kind of boozy note, and I would say outright caramel rather than sort of that Werther's Originally type note that you can get. This one's got a caramelly, biscuity, boozy note to it, but underneath that you do get a bit of a bitey wheat, you get some of the smoother oats out of it, so yeah, quite a nice smelling malt base in this one, I have to say. So that's an interesting point about this one. This one does smell a wee touch boozy. In terms of the hoppy side of things, then you can get a little touch of earthiness out of this one. You do get a good little bit of floral aromaticity, and it has a wee bit of grassiness too, but I really think this beer leans towards the floral end of the spectrum, and I really like how that goes together, in fairness. I mean, this beer, the aroma coming out of this beer, I think is very, very nice, I have to say. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy that. But the fruity side of the beer, for me, is quite interesting. I want to say there's maybe Simcoe in this. It's always fun to play guess the hops with these beers, and you know, Amundsen never tell you what hops are in them. But for me, this one I'm pretty sure there's something that tells me it's got some of the more oily qualities you get out of this beer are a bit reminiscent of Simcoe. So for me, this one has a good bit of a more oily, passion fruity note to it. There is a wee bit of mango in this one as well. It's got a sort of, you know, dried... It's got a kind of sultana type note to it, to be fair, as well, actually. So it's got a bit of a kind of dried apricot-y type quality. That's where this one really lies for me. I mean, you get a few... It's got a sort of peary quality to it as well. You've got a bit of a kind of dried apricot-y note. So a more pungent, oily passion fruit, and a bit of mango as well, actually. But I would say that the passion fruit's a bit more prominent than the dried apricot and sultana-y, peary type notes that you get out of this one. Those are the most prominent things for me, to be honest with you. Maybe there could be a wee bit of lime or something in this one, just a little touch of a lime, a slightly more citrusy note at the front of the nose. So yeah, I'd go with that. A bit limey, a little bit kind of peary as well, some kind of dried sultana notes, a bit of an apricot-y quality, and a wee bit of a more kind of pungent passion fruity note. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer is quite nice, and I do wonder, could there be a bit of Simcoe in this? I don't think Equinaut, to be honest with you. Maybe it could be Motueka that could be giving you the more like kind of limey notes. So yeah, the aroma of this one for me, very oily in its fruity characteristics, and that's a little bit unusual actually. This beer does have a bit of it does almost have a few West Coasty type qualities to it, so it's interesting in that sense. So yeah, beyond the spectrum, could this be a reference to that this beer is a little bit different from other New England IPAs? Who knows? But yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go. And do take a bit of time to look at the aroma of this, because this is a bit different compared to the other IPAs that I've had from Amundsen. There is a hell of a lot of them these days. I've only reviewed a small fraction of them, but yeah, let's have a taste of this and see how we go then. This is the Beyond the Spectrum 7.2% IPA from Amundsen Bryggeri in Oslo, in the capital of Norway. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål. Ah, yeah. That's pretty nice, yeah. It's definitely a bit more... This one, it is more of a kind of oily sort of New England IPA, if that makes sense. Yeah, this one's coming across as more... Let's just get the last of it in. But yeah, this one is sort of coming across as more of a... It's definitely one of the more kind of oily New England IPAs. It almost does taste a little bit like a kind of hybrid, to be honest. But it says on the side here, yeah, this one has wheat, oats and lactose in it. I never ever, I have to say, unless I looked at the can, I would never ever have thought this beer had lactose in it. I never would have thought this beer had lactose in it. So that's an interesting point about this one. It's got lactose in it apparently. But it's more oily. You know, normally with lactose, you're thinking like milkshake IPAs and stuff like this. But yeah, I'm very, very surprised about that this beer has lactose in it. I never ever would have thought that about it. Yeah, that's just crazy, to be honest. So yeah, let's see how we let's kind of analyse this a little bit more, to be honest. Where to start with this? So yeah, straight away with this beer, you can feel that sort of wheaty malt base that it has. If you go to the back third of your tongue, you can definitely feel there's a good bit of a bitey, wheaty type quality out of it. And that's the thing that really would throw me off in terms of the lactose, because normally the lactose would smoothen the wheat out, but the wheat kind of retains that bitey kind of pungency, which is really interesting. This is quite a wheaty leaning New England IPA in my opinion. So yeah, the back third of your tongue, you do get a good bit of a bitey, wheaty quality out of it. But yeah, as you kind of move further forward into the middle third of your palate, you've got a wee bit of a kind of light white bready quality to it. You can feel that forming the baseline of the beer. If you move towards the front third of that, you've got a nice kind of you do have a nice little bit of an oaty creaminess to the beer, but as you move further back, you do have a wee bit of a kind of sweet you do have a bit of a sweet kind of caramelly note in there. In the very centre of your palate, you've got a sweet sort of caramelly note to the beer. Yeah, you do get a bit in the middle of your palate. You do get a wee bit of a you do get a little touch of a that big boozy sweet kind of caramel out of the beer, so you can get that right away out of this one. It's almost on that on the back half of that middle third of your tongue. Definitely a bit more oily. In the very centre, you've got a big kind of boozy or caramel to the beer, and as you move further out from that, it's definitely more and more oily, and you have got a wee bit of a kind of biscuity quality to it as well. So I do like how that comes across. It is quite a boozy, brown sugary note that you get out of this beer, and you can detect the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, the bready notes kind of smoothing out a little bit, and I do like how that goes together. So yeah, the beer, it's an interesting one, this. It feels like it's quite an experimental beer, this, to be honest. And I think it's stylistically, I really think this one is kind of some sort of hybrid between the West Coasters and the New England. It's almost like somewhere in the middle, because I think this one does have a bit more bitterness to it as well. So yeah, it almost seems that this is something they've done. With the I'd love to know what they were aiming for with this, and I think that the name of it as well kind of just makes me think this is a beer that they've tried to do something a little bit different with. But I would just love to know. I wish that Amundsen would write a little bit on the cans about the idea behind these beers. So this one for me is quite an interesting one. This is definitely one that sort of tests the palate rather than just being like a really kind of well crafted beer, if that makes sense. It is well done, don't get me wrong on that, but it's one of these beers that makes me think a bit more, rather than me just turn around and say, this is it's a solid example of the style, so on. This one is a bit different, and I like beers like this that do make you think a little bit. So yeah, I think we've described the malt base pretty straight up in this one. The back third of your palate is definitely a bit more bitey and wheaty. As you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, a bit lighter but also a bit more kind of oily, and it's quite boozy actually. This beer, for a 7.2%, I do find this one quite boozy, in fairness. This one, it really does seem like an attempt to kind of unite the New England and the West Coasty styles, to be honest with you. That's an interesting one. I think it actually even leans a bit more towards the West Coast rather than the New England, in fairness. In the back corners of the palate then, you've got a little bit, there is a wee touch of earthiness there, but as you come further forward along the sides of the palate, this one, it does have quite a bit of hoppy. It has a big kind of spicy floral aromatic note to it. I do wonder if there's a wee bit of Columbus used in this one. There could have even been a little bit of Chinook, just going by the flavours in it as well, because the Columbus will give you that big floral kind of spicy note, and the Chinook will give you the slightly more deeper resiny kind of qualities. And there are there is a little bit of both to this beer, I think. So I like how that, I do like how that goes together. Yeah, this is nice. This is this one. It's one that grows on me a little bit. I was unsure of it when I took it in, but it does grow on me, this one, the more that I drink of it. But yeah, round the front curve of the palate is distinctively more light and grassy, and I do like how that goes together in this one. So yeah, this one definitely on the green side of things. It really leans towards that big spicy floral aromaticity. This does have a good bit more bitterness to it than some of the other beers that I've had from Amundsen. The other thing that's in my mind is that it could be dry hopped, because it does have a bit of that almost dustiness to it. And if you drink a dry hop, I always find that if you drink a dry hopped beer too early, and I might be drinking this one. I think when I got this out of Kiosk, it was, you know, pretty straight up, and I think I've had it about a week now. I think usually you need to let these beers sit in the can for 2, maybe 3 weeks. After the canning date, just to let them, the New England IPAs I think need a little bit of time to just kind of mature out almost. So I do get a bit of that from this beer, but the front third of the tongue of this one is quite interesting. This is where all the fruity characters come out, so let's look at that now. So yeah, fruity side of things, it's actually quite different on that note from how it was in the Aroma. So if you go towards the back of that front third of your tongue, there's a bit of a kind of darker, stronger passion fruit. As you move further forward from that, there is a wee tiny bit of a mango, but I think the passion fruit actually comes quite far forward on this one. Then you do start to get a few lighter tropical notes out of it, like a little bit of an apricot, you know, it's almost kind of like a dried apricot quality, like I was saying from the Aroma. I don't get the limey notes so much out of this one. There's a wee touch of lime almost on the tip of the tongue, and you've got a little bit of that almost perry ester out of the beer. Could this be Idaho 7? Could it be Idaho 7 that's in this one? Because Idaho 7 seems like a can that it would give you all these little complexities and things like that. Idaho 7's got that very soft tropical fruit quality to it, but it also has a wee bit of the kind of more pungent passion fruit. You know, I do wonder, could there be a bit of Idaho 7 in here? As I say, I just like playing guess the hops with these beers at points. So this one, the fruity profile of this is quite interesting. As I say, darker passion fruit, then the passion fruit kind of softens out a little bit and spreads forward. Maybe some people might think a few mangoes, but I really think passion fruit. You get a sort of dried apricot note. There are a few of these kind of sultana and perry type fruity notes to it, and there's a wee touch of it almost seems a bit softer than lime, to be honest. On reflection, it seems a little bit softer than lime. It could be like an almost slightly gooseberry note or something. And if it's gooseberry, you know, the hops that you're bringing into the equation there, potentially Nelson Sauvin, although that's more of a kind of white grapey note. The other option would be Hallertau Blanc. And Hallertau Blanc has that similar white grapey, gooseberry type flavour to it. So yeah, it's an interesting one, this, in terms of its fruit. You know, I think this one does have a wee bit of a kind of gooseberry-ish type flavour on the very tip of the tongue. I don't think it's quite strong enough to be lime. Somewhere between gooseberry and lime. So there's a few. If it's lime, it would be Motueka and Equinault would be the obvious candidates. If it's gooseberry, Nelson Sauvin would be the obvious one. Nelson Sauvin would actually explain some of the kind of spiciness that this beer has, because Nelson Sauvin's a big 16% alpha acid hop. It's a beast, but normally everyone associates it with the softer kind of fruity flavours actually. Usually you add it in the last half hour of the boil, so you don't see so much of that kind of spicy quality that it actually has. But yeah, it's interesting. The fruity qualities of this are really interesting. Oily passion fruit, definitely a kind of almost how do you say? Definitely an almost kind of dry sort of dried apricot, perry, and then a sort of limey gooseberry kind of thing on the front. The fruity side of this beer is quite interesting, but definitely again in terms of character, the fruits are a bit more oily and west coasty. So I think at this kind of juncture it's best that we move on to the mouthfeel. So I would describe this beer as being quite. This one is kind of, it's either top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. Yeah, I would go with that. Top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. Carbonation again is quite smooth. This is an oily IPA. This is an oily beer. There's no doubt in my mind about that. It's oily. It does feel kind of clean because it is Norwegian. Their water has all the kind of mountain spring water type quality to it, so it does feel quite clean, but mainly quite oily. In terms of hoppy bitterness, I think this beer must be about 60 IBUs or something like that. It does have a bit more IBU kick to it. It does have a wee bit of that West Coasty type bitterness. The malt base, like I said, it's got a bit of a kind of wheaty bitiness, but at the same time it's got an oily quality to it as well, but it's quite boozy in fairness as well. It is quite a boozy malt base, this one. So yeah, high IBUs, kind of an oily malt base, and more of an oily, fruity character as well. Actually, it's a really interesting beer. This, I would love to know what they were aiming for with this beer, because it's definitely one. It strikes me as more experimental than some of the other ones. It's a nice beer, but it just doesn't quite seem as refined as some of the other ones that I've had from Amundsen in the past. And in fairness, I would, compared to some other breweries, I would describe Amundsen's beers come across as a little bit almost raw. In that sense, Amundsen's beers are ones that I've always found quite sort of mainly kind of quite bitey and things like that. And they do. That's the thing I like about Amundsen, is that they do have that sort of experimental edge to them. So this is a beer that does make me think a little bit. And I'd say, I don't know if this one is intended to be more of a West Coast IPA, but it certainly leans a bit more towards the West Coasty side of the spectrum for me. But they're calling it Beyond the Spectrum, and I think that probably is a sort of reference to what this beer is intended to be. It's an interesting one for sure. So yeah, if you want something, if you like this brewery, this is a beer that I think you will find very interesting. If you don't know the brewery, I would probably recommend you try something a bit more, something a bit different. I'd probably recommend that you would try the Tropic Thunder, the Apocalyptic Thunder Juice, sorry, or you try is Chuggernaut one of Amundsen's? Yeah, I think Chuggernaut, or one of the big stouts, one of the dessert in a can. So those probably give you a better idea if you haven't tried this brewery of what they're all about. But if you do know Amundsen, then I would recommend this beer for you. I wouldn't recommend this as the first beer you have from them, because it does strike me as one of their more experimental brews. I think that's a fair statement to make about this one. But I've enjoyed this. It's got a bit more West Coasty character to it, but the thing that I do not get anything of out of this is lactose. I'm very surprised that this beer has lactose in it, because it's a lot more oily. I've never had a beer that's had lactose in it that is this oily. That's what really stands out about this one for me. But yeah, really, and a beer, this one, that has definitely made me think, that's for sure. But let's leave it at that for this review. This one was called Beyond the Spectrum, an IPA at 7.2% ABV, very West Coasty in a lot of characters, but it has oats, wheat, oats and lactose in it, which usually would give you a New England IPA, but this one is definitely quite different. Higher IBUs, more oily, and a really quite interesting beer. So try this one if you do like Amundsen Brewery and see what you think. If you are looking at Amundsen Brewery for the first time, I would recommend you try one of their other beers first and then try this one and see what you think. But yeah, really interesting beer, this one. I hope you guys have enjoyed my review. It's nice to have another Norwegian beer on the channel. I like to try and review some Norwegian beers regularly, and hopefully, as I say, we can get more different Norwegian breweries on the channel sometime soon. But yeah, thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Amundsen Bryggeri as well, and we will return to these guys at some point fairly soon, I'm sure. Thanks again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Amundsen Bryggeri. Do go and visit the Amundsen Bryggeri if you find yourself in Oslo, and try a few of their different beers. Slange out, skull. Thank you for watching. Cheers.